everyone, and welcome to a new book video. 2025 marks 250 years since Jane Austen's birth. Jane Austen is my all-time favourite author. I absolutely adore her novels. I reread most of them each year and have done for literally decades of my life now. So this year is a very special one for me, and I'm really looking forward to celebrating Jane Austen throughout the year. But I wanted to start off with a video recommending some books for all of the other Jane Austen fans out there. I've got quite a big stack, so let's get started. First of all, I wanted to talk about some Jane Austen biographies that I really love. A classic biography, and the first one that I read, is Claire Tomalin's Jane Austen, A Life. If you want just a straightforward biography of Jane Austen's life, then this is really the one to go for. It's a classic, it's so well researched, and it really is just a comprehensive look at Jane Austen, her life and her books. So one I really recommend. And then I always love books by Paula Byrne. She's a brilliant biographer, and she's written a couple of books about Jane Austen. And this one is a great take on a biography. It's The Real Jane Austen, A Life in Small Things. And with this book, Paula Byrne has looked at objects in Jane Austen's life and their significance in her life. So it's just a bit of a different way of approaching biography, but it's really well done and very interesting. So another favourite of mine. And then, of course, I love Lucy Worsley's biography of Jane Austen at Home. This is an older edition I have. There's actually a new edition that's been brought out to celebrate the 250th anniversary, which is really nice. But this one, again, it's a biography of Jane Austen, but again, it looks at her life through a bit of a different lens. And Lucy Worsley has chosen to concentrate on the homes that Jane Austen lived in. Houses are really important in Jane Austen's novels, so I thought it was a really great idea to look at her life through the houses that she lived in but also knew and visited. And I just really loved this biography. I'd like to reread it again this year, actually, if I can, because yes, this one was a real favourite of mine, so I recommend that one. And then for some books that give you an interesting insight into Jane Austen's novels in particular, I wanted to recommend a few. This is one of my favourites. It's So You Think You Know Jane Austen by John Sutherland and Deirdre LaFay, who are both Austen experts. And this is a quiz book. And there are some really fantastic quizzes included in this. There are quizzes on all of her 6 main novels, and there are various degrees of levels from quite basic, although even those are quite tricky, to really difficult and questions that actually require a bit of deductive reasoning and analysis of the books and your own point of view and opinion on them. So some of those questions, they don't necessarily have a right or a wrong answer, but they just really provoke interesting discussions of the book. And then obviously some of the easier questions do have right and wrong answers that just test your knowledge of the stories. So I adore this because it not only helps me to recollect the books, but it encourages you to just think deeper about them. So this one I just think is brilliant. And the good thing is, if you get stuck, there are answers in the back. So you can also look at what the authors of the quizzes think as well. And that's just really interesting. Another favourite book of mine that has really helped me in analysing the texts is What Matters in Jane Austen, 20 Crucial Puzzles Solved by John Mullen. John Mullen's also done some great YouTube videos about Jane Austen. They're really well worth watching. He's one of my favourite Austen scholars. I think he just writes and speaks so well about the books, and I love this one by him, and it looks at, as it says, puzzles in the books. So Things like, how much does age matter? What do the characters call each other? Why is the weather important? Why is it risky to go to the seaside? What games do characters play? What do characters say when the heroine is not there? Why do her plots rely on blunders? What do characters read? Always a question I'm interested in. What makes characters blush? When does Jane Austen speak directly to the reader? And what are the right and wrong ways to propose marriage? Many other questions besides. But again, you can see how asking these questions makes you reflect a lot more deeply on the books, and John Mullen's answers to the questions are fascinating reading. If you love the novels but you want to go a bit deeper in your analysis and understanding of the books, as well as Jane Austen's world and the time in which she lived, then this is a really great resource for you. Before I talk about the next book, I wanted to share my offer code for serious readers with you. I'm so thrilled to say that serious readers are very kindly sponsoring today's video. They're such wonderful supporters of my channel. As you know, I love my high definition floor light that I use all the time, so I'm really thrilled to have an offer code to share with you. My offer code is Miranda, that's all capital letters, Miranda. And if you use that offer code, you get £150 off any of the high definition lights by serious readers, as well as free shipping within the UK. Reading is, of course, a huge part of my life. I read every evening, and as well as new books, I actually read quite a lot of vintage books. And these books often have tiny and faded print, which can be quite hard on my eyes. So I really need to be careful about not overstraining my eyes. And this is one of the reasons why I love to read with my high definition floor light. That's because of the amazing light quality that makes it so much easier for me to read any book, including vintage books. All of the high definition lights by serious readers feature something called daylight wavelength technology, and this essentially replicates the daylight spectrum as closely as technically possible. So I love the warm, really natural feeling light that I get when I use my serious readers light, and that just helps so much with my reading and making my reading life really pleasurable for me. I also love that I can adjust the width of the beam of the light as well as the brightness levels on my light, so I get just the right amount of light that's perfect for me wherever I'm reading. I went for the cordless option with my high definition light because where I live is in a really old house. There aren't very many light sockets, so I don't have a lot of places where I can plug in a lamp, and the rooms are quite low lit because of that. That's why I love to have a light like this I can just pick up and carry to wherever I'm reading, whether that's upstairs like here in my bedroom or downstairs in my living room. But anyway, if you also would like to have a great reading light in your life, then do take advantage of my offer code. Again, that is Miranda, all capital letters, Miranda, and that will get you £150 off any of the high definition lights by serious readers, as well as free shipping in the UK. I'll put all of the details, including my offer code and the relevant link, in the video description box just down below. So do check out all of the information there. But now let's get back to my video. Okay, let's move on to another book that's another brilliant choice for those of you who would like to go a bit more in-depth into your study of Jane Austen, and that's the Cambridge Companion to Jane Austen. I bought this many years ago, and it's still a book I turn to every time I really want to think a bit more deeply about the novels, for a book club discussion, for instance, or if I just want to refresh my knowledge of Jane Austen's life and the books. There are essays on the books in here, but there are also essays about Jane Austen and her life, and as well as her works, which is brilliant. So there are chapters, for instance, on the professional woman writer. There are chapters about each of the novels. They're often coupled together. And then there's a chapter on the early short fiction. And then things on specific themes. So for instance, there's a chapter on class, one on money, another on making a living, another on gender. Then there are some on Jane Austen and literary traditions, Jane Austen on screen, and so on. So it's just quite a comprehensive study, not only of the books, but about some of the themes brought out in them, and also a look at Jane Austen in a wider literary as well as social context. So this is just a really great companion for anyone who loves Jane Austen and wants to learn a bit more about the novels. Of course, I also adore the letters of Jane Austen, and I have the whole fat, complete volume of her letters. But a book that I really love just to dip into is this one that's been done by Batsford, and it's the illustrated letters of Jane Austen. Batsford have done a whole series in this set of illustrated letters, and I really love them. I have theirs on the Brontes, for instance, as well. But of course, the Jane Austen one is my special favourite, and I do love that it has wonderful illustrations all through here. And there are just interesting snippets from the letters, which I really enjoy. So this is just a lovely book to have on your shelf if you're a true fan of Jane Austen, and maybe you would like some sort of snippets of her letters to get a feel for them. This is a really lovely book to get, and like I said, it's just really nicely illustrated as well. So a beautiful book that I like having on my shelves. Now, of course, not only do I love Jane Austen's books, but I also adore so many of the film and TV adaptations of her novels. It was the 1995 BBC version of Pride and Prejudice that first started me off on my Jane Austen obsession. I watched that when I was 9 years old, and the rest, as they say, is history. I fell in love with that TV series, it inspired me to read the book. I went on to collect all of Jane Austen's books, all of the audio books that I loved listening to, and so many of these books have been on my shelves for a long time, and it all began with that 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice. I loved the old film of Sense and Sensibility as well, and for anyone who also loved that film that starred Kate Winslet and Emma Thompson, then if you don't have it already, you must get Emma Thompson's wonderful diaries, as well as this volume includes her screenplay, because she wrote the screenplay for Ang Lee's Sense and Sensibility film, and then this also includes the diaries that she wrote while they were filming, which make really funny as well as fascinating reading. So I just love this, and anyone who's a fan of the Sense and Sensibility film would like this too, and you definitely have to watch the film if you've never seen it. There are some nice sort of photographs from the film scattered through, but it really just is such a great read, this one. So definitely a must-have for any Jane Austen fans. And then another book that's devoted to a specific novel of Jane Austen's is Happily Ever After, celebrating Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I'm not sure, I can't remember if this is still in print, but it's definitely worth looking for second hand, as all of these books are that I'm talking about, if any of them are not still in print. This one, if you're a fan of Pride and Prejudice, then absolutely this is a must read. It's just a really fun look at the novel, and also different film adaptations of the novel, for instance. There are chapters on the writing of Pride and Prejudice, reactions to Pride and Prejudice, a truth universally acknowledged, the most famous first sentence, the style of Pride and Prejudice. There are chapters on Elizabeth Bennet and on Fitzwilliam Darcy. There's film and theatrical versions that are looked at in this book. Did They All Live Happily Ever After? Sequels and adaptations. Oh, there's just so much specific to Pride and Prejudice, and it's just a lovely and informative read. So if you adore Pride and Prejudice, then definitely give this book a try. And then another one that is a fun read for Jane Austen fans is Dinner with Mr. Darcy, Recipes Inspired by the Novels and Letters of Jane Austen by Pen Vogler. Pen Vogler is such a wonderful food historian. For instance, here's the white soup. I always remember in Pride and Prejudice when Mr. Bingley talks about holding the Netherfield ball, and he talks about having enough white soup made for it, and white soup is almond soup. And there's a recipe for it in here. But it's just so interesting to learn a bit more about the food that Jane Austen would have eaten, the food her characters would have eaten, and it's just such a interesting book to look in, to dip into, and also to try any of the recipes that you fancy. So another one that I recommend. And then besides food, something I've already touched on a bit there is, of course, dance and balls in Jane Austen novels. They're very, very important. I love so many of the famous ball scenes in her book. You think of the Netherfield ball in Pride and Prejudice, you think of the ball held in Emma, and this is a fantastic book for all of you who love the ball scenes in Jane Austen's novels. It's A Dance with Jane Austen, How a Novelist and Her Characters Went to the Ball by Susannah Fullerton. So in this one, again, there's just really interesting chapters. There's one on learning to dance, getting to and from a ball, assembly balls, and then private balls. So what are the differences between them? Etiquette of the ballroom, men in the ballroom, dancing and music. They sat down to supper, conversation and courtship, The Shade of a Departed Ball, and dance in Jane Austen films. So yeah, so just so many famous ball scenes in Jane Austen's books, from big sort of assembly balls like ones you might think of in Northanger Abbey to much smaller private balls like the ones held in Emma. And this is just a really great way of learning a bit more about how and why her characters danced and how they danced together. So another excellent choice with that one. Then for those of you who love a bit of crafting and embroidery in particular, I think this is a book you would enjoy. That's Jane Austen Embroidery, Authentic Embroidery Projects for Modern Stitchers by Jenny Batchelor and Alison Larkin. And it says it has 15 inspiring and practical embroidery projects. So this book is packed with templates straight from the 18th century that the talented author, Jane Austen, would have stitched herself, but with a modern twist. So from an elegant muslin shawl to a monogrammed tablet sleeve, Jenny Batchelor and Alison Larkin teach you everything you need to know about Regency fashion and crafts, as well as traditional techniques to take your embroidery to the next stage. And there are some really lovely designs in this book. I love embroidery. I wish I had more time for it in my life at the moment, but one day I really hope to get back to it because it's something that I really enjoyed doing when I was younger, and I'd love to get better at it. But this book certainly inspires me to want to pick up a needle and thread again. And there are some interesting little essays in this book, as well as the templates provided. So another lovely one. And then speaking of Jane Austen and clothing, I really love Hilary Davidson's books about Regency fashion and the clothing that Jane Austen in particular would have worn. And I wanted to highlight this book of hers, Jane Austen's Wardrobe by Hilary Davidson. This is such an interesting book. I was first told about Hilary Davidson's books about Regency fashion by Janice Hadlow, who wrote one of my very favourite books set in the world of Pride and Prejudice, The Other Bennet Sister, which I'll be chatting about in a minute. But she used one of Hilary Davidson's books for her research into that novel. And if any of you are interested in Regency society and the Regency period, then of course fashion is such a huge part of that, and dress is very important in Jane Austen's novels. So I really enjoy Hilary Davidson's books on the subject. And this one in particular is so interesting because it closely examines Jane Austen's own wardrobe, looking at specific items that Jane Austen had in her closet and in her wardrobe. And there are examples of what those items might have looked like. And the whole thing is so well researched. So Hilary Davidson has taken extracts from Jane Austen's letters in which Jane Austen talks about her clothing, which she does a lot in her letters. She's very human that way. So for instance, this one, blue gown, the extract from the letter is, Mary's blue gown, my mother must be in agonies. I have a great mind to have my blue gown dyed some time or other. I proposed it once to you, and you made some objection, I forget what. So Hilary Davidson references specific items from Jane Austen's wardrobe found in the letters. Then there's an interesting mini essay about the item, and then there are examples often given of what these articles might have looked like, and a bit of information about them. So it's just such an interesting book and a real favourite on my Jane Austen bookshelf. The next book I want to show you is actually a great companion read to Lucy Worsley's biography, Jane Austen at Home, and that is At Home with Jane Austen by Kim Wilson. This book also examines the homes that were very important to Jane Austen and the different places in which she lived, but there's some really wonderful photographs that accompany the text in this book. So lots of photographs and illustrations that just bring the places to life. So this is one that I love to pull off my shelves and have a look at. It's great for any literary travel inspiration. Bath, for instance, such a wonderful destination for Jane Austen fans. But there are also photographs of Chawton and of Jane Austen's home there. So this is just a really wonderful book with really big illustrations and photographs, and it also is a very interesting read. So this is another lovely one that I like having on my shelf. And then a lovely little book to have on your shelf is this one, Jane Austen's Universal Truths, Wisdom and Witticisms from Her Writing, edited by Susan Hart Byers. If you fancy just a mini dose of Jane Austen, then this is the perfect book because you can open it up and it's filled with wonderful quotes from her novels, and I just enjoy this so much. There are of course so many wonderful quotations, but I also love the illustrations which are done by Polly Fern. I really like Polly Fern's artwork, so that was one of the main reasons why I bought this book a while ago, is because I really appreciate the lovely illustrations in it. So this is a favourite of mine. And then I wanted to, of course, chat about The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This is one of my favourite continuations of Jane Austen novels. So this one is, like I said, set in the world of Pride and Prejudice, or at least partly in the world of Pride and Prejudice. It follows Mary Bennet, the very much overlooked Bennet sister, and it imagines a very different future for Mary than what Jane Austen hinted at in Pride and Prejudice. So part of the action at the start of this book is set within the time frame of Pride and Prejudice itself, but then it goes on past the marriage of Elizabeth and Darcy and into a future unknown to the reader of Pride and Prejudice. I think Janice Hadlow did an amazing job with this book, and it's one that I really think is just an excellent continuation, but imagines a very different future for Mary Bennet and is wonderful as a standalone book in itself in that way. So apparently the BBC have commissioned a 10-part TV series of this, which I'm very excited about. I don't know when it will be out, but I hope it won't be too long, because I think that would be amazing. And speaking of TV adaptations, one has just started of Miss Austen by Jill Hornby. And this one looks at the life of Cassandra Austen, Jane Austen's sister, and it looks at their very close relationship, and it examines the question as to why Cassandra Austen burnt so many of Jane Austen's letters. The BBC have commissioned a TV series on this, and it started last weekend. I haven't watched it yet. I'm saving it for, I hope I'm going to have a bit of a quieter week next week, and I'm going to try and watch it then. It stars Keeley Hawes, and I love Keeley Hawes. I think she's an amazing actress, and she's playing, I believe, the older Cassandra Austen in the series. So I enjoyed the book, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it brought to life. And Jane Austen's relationship with her sister was so important, but there's never been a great deal written about Cassandra Austen. So I very much enjoyed having a book that placed her more centrally. You really get to know Cassandra as well as Jane in this book, and I really appreciated that about it. So one to try if you haven't already, and let me know what you think of the TV series if any of you have watched that yet. I wanted to end with just a few recommendations for some different editions of Jane Austen's novels. I absolutely adore these editions that are curated by Barbara Heller. And this is the complete novel of Pride and Prejudice, with 19 letters from the characters' correspondence written and folded by hand. I think Barbara Heller has done an amazing job with these books. There's one version like this of Pride and Prejudice, this one. There's also one of Persuasion for Jane Austen fans, and I adore that one as well. And I think it's such a clever idea. You've got the actual novel that you can read, but then in between the pages there are little pockets, and I've taken out the letter from this one so I can show it to you. Like it says, there are letters from the characters, so you can unfold and read Darcy's letter to Elizabeth, the one that starts so famously: "Be not alarmed, madam, on receiving this letter by the apprehension of its containing any repetition of those sentiments or renewal of those offers which were last night so disgusting to you." And Barbara Heller put so much thought into what the letters would look like from the characters, how their handwriting would be, how that handwriting would reflect their personalities. And she chose top calligraphers to produce the letters and the handwriting, but she also did a lot of research into the way the paper would have looked, how the letters would have been folded up, and was careful to still make them look quite aged. And I think it's just such a wonderful idea, and it's so much fun to actually be able to unfold the letters that are mentioned in the book. And it's just, a wonderful touch for those of you who love Pride and Prejudice. This is such a wonderful edition of the book. And of course I love the Persuasion one too, especially with that letter from Captain Wentworth to Anne Elliot at the end. So yes, letters, again, really important in Jane Austen's novels. So it's lovely to have these editions that really celebrate the letters from the characters in the book. And then another series that I love of Jane Austen's novels are these editions illustrated by Marjolaine Bastin. They're just so beautifully done. These have lovely floral illustrations all through the book. So they're not illustrations of the characters, they're just really beautiful florals. And I love those as someone who loves pictures of flowers. There are just little ones on almost every page, and it just is a delightful reading experience. And they do also contain little extras slipped in. So here's one, for instance, of the little riddle that Mr. Elton writes for Harriet, or Emma thinks it's for Harriet. So that's slipped in there, and there are just other little bits and bobs sort of put in amongst the pages, like this one, oyster pan with butter, gravy and chestnuts, a little recipe from the art of cookery made plain and easy. As we know, Mr. Woodhouse loves plain food. So yes, just a really beautifully illustrated edition of one of my favourites. There are quite a few of the Marjorie Bastin ones done. I especially love this one of Emma, so I wanted to highlight this one. And then, as you can probably tell, I am quite an obsessive when it comes to Jane Austen's novels, which means that I love annotated editions of her books. And I have a few of them. I'm showing you another one of Pride and Prejudice here, and this is the annotated edition. And when I love a book, if an annotated edition is available, then I do like to get it, because I love getting all of those little details and extra information around the novel. That always just interests me so much. So to have an annotated edition of Pride and Prejudice really matters to me, because I just love getting those extra insights. And this is a really beautiful version of the book as well. It's illustrated, and I think it's just very well done. Now, this isn't one that I would pick up to read in bed, for instance, but when I want to really take a closer look at the novel, then this is the sort of edition that I'll pull out and take a look at all of the notes that go alongside the text, and I really enjoy being able to do that. But anyway, those are the books that I wanted to highlight for you today. Do let me know if you're a Jane Austen fan as well, and if you are, which is your favourite of her novels. I hope you found these recommendations helpful if you are a fan of Jane Austen. As always, I'll put all of the information for the books I've shared in the video description box just down below, so be sure to check out all of the information there. But yes, thank you so much for watching. Extra big thanks as always to the people who pressed the super thanks button on my last video. I so appreciate your support, but thank you to everyone who watches my videos, and I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.